Hello folks, it's time for some more lore. We are heading over to do the Deathwatch now, which is something I've been waiting to do for quite a while, and also one that I've been kind of dreading. I know I say that a lot, but the Deathwatch is really one of those things that I don't really want to change that much. But anyway, before we get into it, if you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below. Also, Composite Games do a lot to help out the channel. If you're getting any sort of models, then make sure you give them some love in the description down below. Use the promo code Northern Exile to get yourself 5% off at checkout. All good stuff. So, I'm not sure how long this video is going to go, because this is going to be one of the shorter lore videos, because I don't have that much to change about the Deathwatch, but I am glad we are going back to the Space Marines for a little while. I think my Xenos coverage has been pretty hit and miss, so it's nice to return to more familiar territory at least. The Xenos, I've always said, I don't know too much about the Xenos. I read up on them for these videos. I know about their loose lore and different bits of their lore that have happened over the years, but in terms of like the intricacies of how they work, I have to read up before every single video. And so, some of my interpretations of them do seem a little wide of the mark, especially the Tyranids. I think I'll come back to that at a later date, because I'm not quite happy with how that video turned out. So I will come back to it at another time. But hey, back to the Space Marines for a little while. Give ourselves a break from the Xenos for a bit, and then we'll come back to them. So, the Deathwatch, as one of the Chamber Militants of the Inquisition, the Ordo Xenos to be precise, are supposed to be the premier hunters of the alien within the galaxy. They are one of the more elegant factions of Space Marines when it comes to their lore, so this is one of those more difficult videos to do, as there are a lot of things about the Deathwatch that I like a lot. So let's dive in and have a look under the hood of this loose brotherhood of hunters, shall we? Alright, so, the good. The good section of this video is going to be larger than the bad. I'll get that out the way straight away. If you want me to hear me ream out the Deathwatch and how bad they are, this is not going to be one of those videos. I actually really like the Deathwatch and how they act and how they go about their business. The Deathwatch as a faction are a clearly thought out chapter with a singular goal that is well represented and pursued in all things. In short, there is very little I would change about them. If you are looking for a more grounded Space Marine faction that is not the Raptors, but functions very much like a sane... Sorry, 1 second. Like a sane modern military in 40k, dressed in power armor, the Deathwatch are for you. So, the Deathwatch, essentially, they act just like you would think a modern military would act if they were wearing power armor and equipped with bolt guns. You know what I mean? So you have the Raptors on one side of the equation, where they are very surgical, very, shall we say, into sniping and things like that, and fighting wars as you should fight them. Well, the Deathwatch are very much the same way. They're cut from the same cloth in certain ways. Mainly because they have a job to do, and their entire premise is dedicated to that. All of their weaponry is dedicated to fighting Xenos. All of their tactics are dedicated to fighting Xenos. And they fight Xenos in a way that makes complete logical sense, right? They fight fire with fire, and they are the only ones allowed to do this. As I've just said, their weaponry is advanced and laced with Xenos technology that only they are permitted to use. Their tactics are solely geared to dealing with the Xenos threats that are out there in the galaxy. From acid-laced Promethium for dealing with Tyranids, to Necron weapons charged with phase technology, the Deathwatch have it all. They also work within the universe from a top-down standpoint. They are seen almost as a penal chapter for other chapters to send their misbehaving Marines at times. This is great, as it makes complete sense. You cannot imprison a Space Marine. They are too precious a resource for the Imperium unless you're going to put a bolt round through their head for being a traitor. So, give them to someone else so they can remain an asset and hopefully return with a new sense of duty and purpose. Some Marines never leave the Deathwatch, such as their dedication and skill to their craft. This is something that I've always loved about the Deathwatch and how they act in the wider lore. They are given to this chapter simply sometimes because they've been misbehaving. They have not taken orders. They have questioned their superiors. They've gone beyond the call of duty in a bad way in certain terms. They've killed Imperial citizenry to get at a certain target. Things like that. And that's why they're sent to the Deathwatch. I like this. Because it shows, like, it almost gives like a Band of Brothers style meaning to the Deathwatch, and that is something that the Space Marines sometimes are sorely lacking. We have it within the Imperial Guard. There are several Imperial Guard regiments, and even penal regiments, that are filled with prisoners who are wanting to earn their redemption. And whilst we can't technically do that with the Space Marines, because they're supposed to be whiter than white for the most part, we can give them to somebody like the Deathwatch as a bunch of naughty boys who've gone up beyond Imperial orders and gone off on their own a bit AWOL, you know what I mean? I really like that. And there should be more chapters that are kind of like this, but to be honest with you, I'm kind of glad the Deathwatch are the only ones. Even the creation of the Deathwatch is extremely realistic and elegant. During the War of the Beast, the Imperium was forced to create smaller kill teams of Space Marines to go after specific targets within the Orc hordes. Such Marines were drawn from companies heavily devastated by the fighting and performed long vigils over their brothers' bodies before taking their new oaths as the Deathwatch. Hence the name of Deathwatch being granted to them. They were born in quite possibly the most vicious battle against Xenos the Imperium has seen beyond the Great Crusade, which is both fitting and right. Square pegs into square holes. Again, the entire lore of the Deathwatch is exactly that. Square pegs and square holes. Writers saying, hey, we need a Xenos fighting group of Space Marines. How do we go about that? Okay, well we should give them Xenos weaponry. How do they get Xenos weaponry? Well, they're the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Xenos, so they have access to all of these things under Imperial decree. Okay, and what do they look like? Well, they should be black, but with like a bit more silver in there, because we want the Ordo Xenos badge on there somewhere. Okay, that's fine. Okay, how do they operate? Well, they operate in small kill teams, going after certain infestations of Xenos around the galaxy, and they only unite at certain times to face the largest threats of Xenos that are around. Beautiful, elegant stuff written from the top down that really shows that Games Workshop do know how to craft a really cool chapter from the ground up, and not cave to any sort of, mysterious, ridiculous business, Anyway. Like the other chapters, however, the Deathwatch do still recruit normally with their use of scouts and other recruits to become part of their number. The sources I have found state that the Deathwatch receive an allocation of scout marines from other chapters rather than using any specific gene seed for this purpose. Again, square pegs, square holes. Very elegant. That Games Workshop could have easily have said here, well, they have gene seed from other Primarchs that come in and they just make new Marines that way. That would be silly. That would be silly. Instead, they get an allocation of scouts that they already know are not tainted by chaos. They come in and they're trained to be Deathwatch. Lovely stuff, elegant stuff, really like it. Now to my favourite part of the Deathwatch. I know, my tongue could not be further up their arsehole right now, but bear with me. The colours of the Deathwatch are badass. Nothing else to say there, really. The new chapter of Kill Team, my Renegade chapter, are going to be very similar in colour to the Deathwatch, because I just think they're really, really, really cool. Their silvered arm, their one silvered arm, is a lovely touch, whilst the chapter symbol on the other pauldron shows that all Marines are, ostensibly, temporary in their belonging to the Brotherhood. I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it when Space Marine chapters have markings on their armour that tell you a story about who they are, where they come from, and what they do. This is why, with certain chapters like the Ultramarines, I find it really hard to get excited about them, because at the end of the day, all it shows me is that they're an Ultramarine. It doesn't show me what their culture is, what their mode of warfare is, it doesn't tell me what their homeworld looks like, it doesn't tell me what their customs are, it doesn't tell me anything about them apart from the fact that they're Ultramarines, The one thing that I will give the Space Wolves credit for is that when you look at a Space Wolf, you know what their culture is. They're Space Vikings. That's what they are. You can tell straight away what a Space Wolf is. When you look at a White Scar, you can tell straight away that's a hunter society. Those are guys who go out and hunt big beasties. You know, whether it be human or traitor or Xenos or otherwise, that's what they do. I love that. Brilliant. The Deathwatch are probably the most prime example of this. Every single piece of them tells a story. From the silvered arm bearing the insignia of the Ordo Xenos, right, wiping away all of the blackness that is probably on their record, to the black armour still showing that they're naughty boys, and they are the Deathwatch after all, and the other arm showing the story of the chapter that they came from. You can tell all sorts of things about how a Deathwatch Marine looks, and the actual way that you can customize your Deathwatch force in all of the sets. I still think the Deathwatch Kill Team set is probably the best one that they ever made for the normal Firstborn Marines. The sheer amount of options in there is slightly ridiculous, and you can make your Deathwatch Kill Team look completely unique to what you want it to do. The only problem is that the Deathwatch in the lore tend to move away from this modus operandi, and in my change later on, that's what I'm going to try and get them back to. Spoilers, but that, I will go into that a bit later on. It also breaks up the black perfectly. So all of their colours, they break up the black perfectly. If you want to practice painting black, Deathwatch are a great choice, as you get to not only get to practice painting black, but to not get so bogged down in the constant painting of a single colour. My hat's off. My hat comes off to people like Imperial Fist players, constantly doing yellows. I'm all there with you. But like the Deathwatch are really good if you want to change, you do different colours on single Marines. Brilliant stuff. Anyway, enough of me loving on them. Let's show the bad, shall we? It's hard to see the menace of the Deathwatch when we cannot really empathise with their enemies. That sounds weird. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the enemies of the Deathwatch are not human. When a Dark Angel Terminator pulps the brain of a Chaos cultist, that cultist was still human. And so, we can empathise with the power of the Dark Angel, because we can imagine it happening to us. The same is not the case with the Deathwatch. It's hard to see what they do as anything more than squishing bugs, but on a larger scale. You could simply show the Deathwatch as a rather large, angry, sentient can of bug spray, and you have a good idea of how they operate. Secondly, their singular focus means that, like the Grey Knights, they will only really be seen fighting one foe, Xenos. Whilst it is a strength that there are so many different types of them to fight, the Xenos are not and will never be the poster enemy boys of the Warhammer 40,000 setting. That's not the Xenos. That's not who the Xenos are. That honour will always belong to the Chaos Space Marines and the Demons of the Warp. This means that if you choose to play Deathwatch as your army, you are almost always going to be stuck on the fringes of the greatest fights the galaxy knows. Even in the Black Crusade, the Deathwatch were fighting Eldar at a time when the galaxy was about to be swallowed by chaos. All to stop a god from being born that could very well have stopped the tide of chaos in its tracks and annihilated Slaanesh. I cannot but help feeling that the Grey Knights would have aided the Eldar in this pursuit, but it does show how frustratingly kept apart from the key goings-on the Deathwatch can be by their very nature, and no fault of their own, really, By their very nature of going after Xenos and going after that kind of enemy, they're kept apart from all of the big goings-on in the galaxy, which is kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame. I'm very glad that they got to fight the Eldar, by the way, in the 13th Black Crusade. I'm glad that they were there, but they were still kept apart from the real goings-on of the Imperium, which is kind of sucks. I mean, even the Eldar were there, man. Even the Eldar had people there. You need and all that, all that stuff going on. Anyway, so what would I change? Well, in a few words, not much. There is not much to be done about the Deathwatch without changing their original nature and purpose. Something I don't want to do. I did it with Tyranids last time, and it left a bad taste in my mouth, and made me want to redo the video that I will do at a later date. So, I don't want to do that again. Instead, I want to change how the Deathwatch works internally, rather than what their core mission is. In our setting, the Deathwatch are a chapter just as you see in the modern 40k setting, but with a few key changes. Alright? They stick to their original modus operandi. Kill teams and assassination squads meant to take down the big heads of massive Xenos forces. By big heads, I mean the leaders, the HQ choices, things like that. The numbers of the Deathwatch should never be extremely high because of the very nature of their recruitment. They should be specialist forces called in when a Xenos threat needs breaking in the worst way. When a war boss needs killing, when a zoanthrope needs detonating, whenever a key Xenos threat leading a massive horde is on its way, the Deathwatch are called if they are anywhere nearby. They then hand-pick select warriors perfectly suited for the job at hand. Demolitions, sniping, warpcraft, close combat, whatever the case may be, each kill team is tuned to perform one such task against Xenos to perfection. They are essentially the 40k Space Marine equivalent of a Formula 1 car, right? You can't drive a Formula 1 car on normal roads. Well, you could do, but it wouldn't go very well for you if you tried to put the gas on at any point, you know? It's not meant for that. It's not built for that. You need to be going at a certain speed to keep it on the bloody track. The same thing goes for the Deathwatch in my setting. They are geared towards certain things. Every kill team is laser focused on one thing. Alright? You wouldn't send a sniping team to fight a massive orc horde on their own. That kind of a thing. They are not a jack of all trades. They are surgical strike teams. That's how they operate. This means that some Deathwatch kill teams will focus on tracking and killing Eldar Farseers and Psykers of other Xenos factions. We can even throw a Psychic Blank or two into those kill teams and have them work with Colexus Assassins and things like that, right? Others will be chain-wielding maniacs who tear into Orc formations and other large combat-heavy scenarios where a path needs to be carved to a specific target. Okay? Hopefully you're following along here. So, a typical surgical strike of the Deathwatch we'll see them doing something like this. So, let's say they are sent to take down a massive Orc war boss who has conquered an Imperial world, and nobody can really get to him. His weird boys have set up psychic shielding, whilst his lads do some looting within a city with him at their centre. The Deathwatch send just 3 kill teams of 10 warriors, because they're not there to annihilate the entire force of Xenos. They're not there to annihilate all 50,000 orcs. That's not what they're there to do. The psychic kill team takes down the barrier, exploding the heads of the weird boys after infiltrating the horde. The combat kill team carves their way to the target without engaging him openly, opening a clear firing lane to the war boss away from the rest of his horde. The sniper kill team rains down lead on the war boss, pulping his head into mush before the survivors of all 3 kill teams are retrieved by Corvus Blackstars that lay down covering fire for them to mount into the flyers and escape. Alright? You would think that this is how the Deathwatch operates in 40k now, but it is not. But I'm going to go back to that and see. You may think it's unrealistic for a kill team of 30 to take down an Orc horde, but they haven't took down the Orc horde. They've took down 1 Orc. That 1 Orc is holding the horde together, and without that 1 Orc, the Orcs quickly turn on each other and are easy prey for the rest of the Imperial forces that are surrounding them at this point. With 30 Marines, we've broken the back of a horde with a precision surgical strike, okay? We've still lost most of our Marines, by the way, especially the assault force that went in there to carve a path to him. Most of them are dead. I'm not saying this should be a perfect thing every time, but with this 1 surgical strike, we've managed to significantly weaken an Orc horde to the point that the more conventional Imperial forces can take it out. Awesome stuff. This is how it works with the Deathwatch in my setting from moment zero. This is how they work, right? They don't really come together as a force of 1,000 Marines. That's not how they operate, okay? Each strike team is in a small craft, and off they go. They're called in whenever they're called in. Again, you would think this is how the Deathwatch operates in 40k now, because there are certain parts of the lore that hint that this is the case, but it's not. Whilst Games Workshop shells you kill teams in the lore, the chapter tends to act as a single entity, which is very odd. It's almost as if Games Workshop's writing staff have forgotten what the Deathwatch are and what makes them unique. They were made as a kill team chapter, yet they fight most of the time as a united chapter. That's not how it should work. There's nothing wrong with chapters having their own specialities. Not in my opinion, anyway. Similarly, I would like to fiddle with the idea of the Black Shields for just a minute. The Black Shields within the Horus Heresy were Marines that had left their traitor legions, or the like, and swore loyalty to no side, or they kept their loyalty to the Imperium. It's a myriad hodgepodge of different motivations. Well, the Black Shields of the Deathwatch in my setting are only allowed to join the Deathwatch if they bring with them knowledge of Xenos that are working directly with the forces of Chaos. In the Horus Heresy, we see this happening with things with Xenos races like the Leia and other races that are corrupted by the Dark Gods. This is a phenomenon that, whilst the Horus Heresy took advantage of it, we don't see it in the normal 40k timeline. We don't see things like the Leia. We don't see other Xenos races that have fallen to the purview of the Chaos Gods. There should be loads of them out there that are corrupted by Chaos, but we don't see any of them. I would have the Deathwatch brought into the wider fold of the galactic narrative by having them chase down such threats as a priority. It puts them directly into the crosshairs of the 13th Black Crusade and brings them into the wider story of what is going on with the Imperium. I would have Abaddon take advantage of the fact that, there are Xenos out there that are corrupted by Chaos, and so he throws them against the Imperial citizenry and Imperial forces. These are forces that the Deathwatch are then brought in to break the back of. Wonderful stuff. So, don't treat the Deathwatch like a normal Space Marine chapter. They're not. Treat them like the specialists they are, and you will diversify the roster of one of 40k's most standard formations in the Space Marines. What do you think? Have I gone too far? Have I not gone far enough? Let me know in the comment section down below. Again, I really like the Deathwatch. Hopefully you're not too disappointed that I haven't reamed them a new one. But, maybe in the next one. Love you all a long time. I will speak to you tomorrow for some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Love you all. See you later. Have a good one. Bye.